Kenya, my country. I'll defend and guard it with my life.
Advance! Wazi!
This must be the vows that a young man's mind must be reciting when going in for recruitment to join the Kenya Army. The Kenya Army holds a key role in our beloved country's sovereign structure. The main role played by the Kenya Army relates to the defense of Kenya against land-based external aggression. The Kenya Army also plays a key role by providing aid to civil authority in the maintenance of order while performing any other tasks as may be assigned by the state through the Chief of Defense Forces. We can trace the Kenya Army from the British Empire in the 19th century. This period was characterized by active involvement of the British in the enforcement of abolition of slave trade in East Africa. During the same period, other European nations were also developing an interest in acquiring spheres of influence in Africa. In this rivalry, the British established the Imperial British East Africa Company to take care of its interests. In 1873, the Sultan of Zanzibar, Said Bagash, signed the final treaty to abolish slave trade in all his dominions. The task of enforcing the abolition was vested on the British Royal Navy fleet under Admiral Freeman Tye. The British resident consul Sir John Kirk and the Sultan realized that this could only be achieved through the establishment of a reliable land force which could be used in the hinterland as opposed to the British patrol boats whose operations were limited to the coastal region. In 1877, a Royal Navy officer, Lieutenant Lloyd Matthews, serving in the HMS London, formed a small force of 300 Zanzibaris for the purpose of combating slave trade. By 1880, the force had grown to 1,300 men who were all armed with Snider rifles donated to the Sultan by the British government. This was the first known force in East Africa that had recruited indigenous Africans to serve under the British. It was this native force that was later to become the East African Rifles. On 8 September 1888, the British Africa Company was granted Royal Charter and was charged with the responsibility of administering British East Africa on the lands of a crown colony. The name of the company changed to Imperial British East Africa Company, IBEA. The new protectorate administration divided East Africa into 3 provinces. These were Siidie, Ukamba, and Jubaland. Siidie was garrisoned by 400 Swahili and Sudanese troops who were later joined by an Indian contingent under Captain Barat. The period between 1896 and 1900 saw the East African Rifles deployed in a number of campaigns in line with the British colonial policies. In 1901, the British government decided to organize all the existing troops in Central Africa, East Africa, Uganda, and Somaliland under one command. Lieutenant Colonel Manning, an officer in the Indian Corps, was appointed Inspector General for all the troops and promoted to the rank of General. After the troops based in different parts of British East and Central Africa territories were placed under central command, the regiment born thereof was officially designated King's African Rifles on 1st January 1902. The composition of this regiment was as follows. The 8 companies of 1 Central African Rifles became the 1 Battalion King's African Rifles. The 6 companies of 2 Central African Rifles became 2 Battalion King's African Rifles. The 7 companies and 1 Camel Company of East African Rifles became 3 Battalion King's African Rifles. The 9 companies of Uganda Rifles became 4 Battalion King's African Rifles. The 4 companies of the contingent of Uganda Rifles became 5 Battalion King's African Rifles. The 3 infantry companies, Camel Corps, Militia and Mounted Infantry based in Somaliland became 6 Battalion King's African Rifles. The 6 battalions formed a regiment which had a total of 104 officers and 4,579 men. On 1st April 1902, 3 KAR moved its headquarters from Mombasa to Nairobi together with 4 KAR and 5 KAR. These battalions were used by the British colonial government in expeditions against those who resisted British rule. This was, however, reconstituted in 1916 during the World War I and stationed in Meru. Later in 1926, 5 KAR was again disbanded and their colors were handed over to 3 KAR for safe custody. On 1st March 1930, the unit was once again reconstituted, presented with their colors and stationed in Nairobi. After World War II, both battalions were used by the colonial government to contain the Mau Mau rebellion. On the dawn of independence, the Kenyan National Assembly passed a bill, the Kenya Bills 1963, to amend the status of the military forces in Kenya. Accordingly, the former units of the King's African Rifles were transformed to Kenya Military Forces, and the independent Kenya government was legally empowered to assign names to the units as deemed necessary, with effect from the midnight of 12th December 1963. Thus, 3 KAR and 5 KAR became 3 Kenya Rifles and 5 Kenya Rifles respectively. 3 KAR, which was the forerunner of today's Kenya Army, was formed on 1st January 1902. The transformation of King's African Rifles to Kenya Military Forces on the midnight of 12th December 1963 is a major milestone in the foundation of today's Kenya Army units. The inauguration of the Kenya Military Forces, which is the current Kenya Army, therefore robs the thunder from 3 KAR because the former was a composition of all army units in existence at the day of independence. The colonial empire therefore drew on the strength of our pre-colonial military systems to create the King's African Rifles, a formidable force that laid the foundation of the regiment that formed the present Kenya Defense Forces. Part of the King's Rifles were in various countries in Africa. While the King's African Rifles was basically a colonial force that served the interests of the British Empire, it inspired a sense of dedication to duty, pride and professionalism in its ranks and file. This then evolved into the Kenya Army at our independence. The Kenya Army continued to build on these high standards of professionalism and discipline to emerge as the efficient, modern and patriotic organization that Kenyans can be proud of today.
By 14:25 hours.
Legislatively, the Kenya military came into being by an Act of Parliament in 1962, that is the Kenya Military Forces Act Cap 198. This was subsequently repealed in 1968 by another Act of Parliament, creating the Armed Forces Act Cap 199. Under the new Kenyan Constitution that was promulgated on 27 August 2010, the title Kenya Defense Forces has been adopted. The Kenya Defense Forces falls under the Ministry of State for Defense in the Office of the President. Women were first recruited in the Defense Forces in 1972. They remained a single entity as the Women's Service Corps WSC. They served under different terms and conditions of service designed to meet the requirements of defense forces, taking into account their special needs. The Women's Service Corps was dissolved on December 1st, 1999, and its personnel were integrated into the mainstream formations of the defense forces. They serve under the same terms and conditions of service as their male counterparts, with various safeguards to suit their special individual needs. In the Kenya Army, women traverse the whole spectrum of careers, including drivers, mechanical and electrical engineering, communications technicians, clerks, accountants, military police women, lawyers, doctors, and infantry. This is history well told in picture form of the transition journey of the Kenya Army. We salute the Kenya Army for ensuring safe transition since independence as the Commander-in-Chief takes office. From His Excellency the late President Mzee Jomo Kenyatta, His Excellency President Daniel Arap Moi, His Excellency President Mwai Kibaki, to date His Excellency President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta. Kenya Army is one of the three forces that make the Kenya Defence Forces. The mandate of the Defence Forces as provided from the Constitution is self-sustaining and can be exercised by the Defence Forces in the pursuit of the protection of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of our Republic. The KDF also have a secondary role of assisting and cooperating with civil authorities in situations of emergency or disaster and may be deployed to restore peace in any part of Kenya affected by unrest or instability as assigned. The Kenya Army was established to protect Kenya from land-based aggression. The Kenya Air Force is tasked with the defense of the Kenya airspace, while the Kenya Navy being in charge of defending Kenya's territorial waters from sea-based aggression. The headquarters of Kenya Army is in Hurlingham, Nairobi. This has been their headquarters since 1973 when they moved from Harambee House in the city centre. With the Kenya Army on guard of our land, it is also mandated to provide aid and support to civil authority in the maintenance of order.
Watch your front!
The Army also participates in internal peace support operations in support of the national foreign policy objectives. As Kenyans, we take pride in our forces for their dedication to safeguard the country and its people. Some of the previous incursions that the Kenya Army has had to employ its assets to the fullest are the Shifter Campaign, the Amuma Incident, Operation Good Hope 4, Operation Dumisha Amani, Operation Linda Mpaka is once again another hats off to our Kenya Army operation. This was a joint venture involving one infantry battalion, Kenya Air Force assets, and 2 Kenya Navy boats. The objective was to deter any incursion into our country by the Al-Qaeda-linked terror group the Al-Shabaab and the Islamic Courts Union. Operation Linda Mpaka 2 was carried out by troops of Kenya Rifles at Northeastern Province with the objective of identifying and deterring extremist activities and to prevent infiltration of Al-Shabaab sympathizers. The achievement of this operation was that the Kenya Army managed to identify and deter extremists. Operation Rudisha Amani. Operation Dumisha Amani 2 incursion secured Mount Elgon. Operation Mamba. This was one of the joint operations by the Kenya Defence Forces with the Kenya Navy as the lead service and in collaboration with the Kenya Army. Its aim was to conduct maritime patrol along the coastline and EEZ to deter and combat piracy and make shipping activities safe. Operation Linda Nchi was a continuation of the Operation Linda Mpaka 2 and is still ongoing. The aim of the operations is to deter Al-Shabaab threat and cross-border smuggling. Operation Linda Nchi in Somalia was very successful and Kenyan troops were formally integrated and rehated into AMISOM by the UN. Green. So far, the KDF under the auspices of AMISOM has registered one of its most successful stints in the war against Al-Shabaab after they captured more than 20 towns in Somalia, and more particularly 2 of their strongholds towns of Afmado and the coastal city of Kismayo. The performance of Kenya Army in peace support operations has earned the respect of the UN, and Kenya has been given the honor of participating in peace support operations in many troubled spots worldwide since 1979. Kenyan officers have served in senior appointments. For instance, Lieutenant retired Daniel Opande has been Force Commander in Sierra Leone. Major General retired Simon Karanja and Major General Francis Ndenge have previously served as Deputy Force Commanders in AMISOM, while Major General Leonard Ngondi and Major General Jonathan Rono are still holding senior positions in Sierra Leone and AMISOM in Somalia, respectively. Therefore, KDF, being a panacea or an insurance policy to the Kenyan population, has grown over time to be able to provide protection to all Kenyans. With its vision to develop an army deeply rooted in professionalism and certain of its ability to achieve its mission, truly the Kenya Army has done our country and its people proud. The Kenya Army, ngao ya taifa. Kenya, my country, I'll defend and guard it with my life.